Ezra knelt before the impossible door, his knees pressed into damp earth, his breath misting in the autumn cold. The door stood alone in the barren field. No frame, no walls, no house. Just ancient oak carved with runes that seemed to shift in the moonlight, like worms beneath skin. His hand trembled as it hovered near the iron ring that served as a handle. The whisper came again, soft as a lover's secret. Speak a name, and I shall open. In some villages, temptation doesn't wear a face. It wears a voice. 3 weeks before, Ezra had been nothing more than what he'd always been, a collector of debts and carrier of messages. He walked the narrow streets of the village with his leather satchel, knocking on doors that opened with sighs, delivering news no one wanted, and collecting coins no one wished to give. The villagers looked through him as though he were made of morning fog. At night, he returned to his small room above the baker's shop, where the smell of yesterday's bread could not quite mask his loneliness. He ate his supper in silence, listening to the laughter of families through thin walls, wondering what it felt like to be remembered. It was on one of these twilight walks, taking a shortcut through the eastern field, that he first saw it, the door, standing in the middle of nothing, catching the last rays of sunset, like a monument to something forgotten. Ezra circled it slowly, his heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm. He touched the wood, warm, despite the cooling air. He peered through the keyhole and saw only more field on the other side. He should have walked away. Instead, he pressed his ear to the wood, and the door whispered his name. Speak a name, and I shall open. Ezra pulled back, startled, but the field was empty, only wind and evening birds. He told himself he'd imagined it, but the next night he returned, and the night after that. Each time, the whisper grew clearer, more insistent, like a question that refused to fade. On the fourth night, curiosity won. Thomas, he whispered. Thomas the blacksmith, who always made Ezra wait outside his forge, who never offered him water on hot days. The door shuddered. The iron ring turned slightly, and from within came a sound like a long, satisfied breath. Ezra waited, but nothing else happened. He walked home, unsettled but strangely exhilarated. The next morning, he went to collect a debt from Thomas. The blacksmith opened the door, looked straight at Ezra, and said, "Can I help you, stranger?" Ezra blinked. "It's me, Ezra. I come every month." Thomas squinted. "Don't know any Ezra. You sure you have the right house?" A cold thread pulled tight around Ezra's stomach. But beneath the fear, something else stirred, something darker and more thrilling. Power. He told himself he would stop. But that night, he returned to the door. "Margaret," he whispered. Margaret, the baker's wife, who always gave the burnt loaves to Ezra with a pitying smile. The door creaked open just an inch. Through the gap, he saw nothing but darkness, yet he felt a wind that smelled of dust and forgetting. The next day, Margaret couldn't remember how to make bread. She stood in her kitchen, weeping over flour, unable to recall the recipe her mother had taught her. Ezra watched from his window above and felt something inside him grow hollow. But he couldn't stop. Simon, the butcher who shortchanged him. Claire, the woman who crossed the street to avoid him. Old Peter, the priest who once called him unfortunate. Each name cost the door a little more opening. Each name cost the speaker something invisible. Ezra began forgetting the taste of apples, then the color of his mother's eyes, then the sound of his own laughter. He woke one morning unable to remember if he'd ever had a childhood friend or if loneliness had always been his only companion. But the door was almost fully open now, and beyond it, he was certain, lay something magnificent, some secret the world had kept from him, some meaning to justify his small, forgotten life. On the edge of the village, where the forest pressed close and the mist never quite lifted, lived a blind hermit in a cottage of crooked stones. People said she'd once been beautiful, that she'd once had a different name, but those who remembered were long dead. Ezra went to her because the voices in the village had begun to change. People whispered of strange dreams, of forgetting their children's faces, of waking with the sense that something precious had been stolen in the night. He knocked on her door at dusk. "I know why you've come," she said before he could speak. Her eyes, milky white, seemed to look straight through him. You found the door. Ezra's breath caught. You know of it? I spoke to it once. Long ago, before I learned. She poured him tea with steady, practiced hands. The door doesn't open outward, boy. It opens inward. Every name you speak, you give away a piece of the world, and a piece of yourself. It's not taking from them. It's taking from you. But I can feel it, Ezra insisted. There's something on the other side, something important. The hermit smiled sadly. Yes, there is. All the things you've given away. All the things that made the world full. The door will show you everything you've lost, and then it will take the last thing, the one who did the losing. How do I stop it? You can't. She set down her cup. The door only has one key, and you've already turned it. Now it will keep asking until you've given everything. Ezra left her cottage as the last light died, his heart thundering with denial. She was wrong. She had to be wrong. He tried everything. He stood before the door and shouted names backward. Sameth, Telegram, Nomus. Nothing. He brought the village priest, but the holy man couldn't see the door at all. He walked straight through where it stood, as if through empty air. Ezra tried burning the field. The flames parted around the door, like water around stone. He tried speaking the names of the dead, the names of saints, the names of forgotten gods. The door only creaked wider, patient and hungry. Each night he lost more. The memory of rain on his face, the word for sunrise, the knowledge of why bread smells the way it does. The village began to hollow. People moved like shadows, forgetting why they wept, forgetting what they'd forgotten. Children stopped playing. Lovers sat in silence, unable to recall what drew them together. And still, the door stood open, just enough to show darkness, but not enough to reveal what lay within. On the night of the new moon, when the village was silent as a grave, Ezra stood before the door one last time. It was open now to the width of his shoulders. The darkness within seemed to breathe. He had one name left to speak, the only name that mattered. His hands shook. His heart beat once, twice, 3 times, each beat feeling like the last thing he owned. Ezra, he whispered. The door burst open. Light poured out, not bright, but soft and golden, like all the candlelit evenings he'd ever missed, all the warm hearts he'd passed by unseen. And in the light, he saw them. Faces. Hundreds of faces. The blacksmith, young and laughing. Margaret, teaching her daughter to knead dough. Simon and Claire dancing at a harvest festival. Old Peter blessing a child. And there was Ezra himself, a boy running through fields, a young man in love, a friend sharing bread, a son held by his mother. All the lives he'd erased by giving names, all the connections he'd severed, all the warmth he'd drained from the world in his hunger to be someone, to matter, to have power over the forgetting. The door showed him what he'd taken, not from them, but from himself. Every name he'd spoken had erased not their memory of him, but his memory of being part of the world, his right to belong to the tapestry of ordinary love and ordinary days. The voices rose from the darkness, 100 mouths speaking in unison. Ezra, Ezra, Ezra. His own name, echoing back, each repetition softer than the last. And then silence. The door vanished with the last echo. The field stood empty in the dawn light, just grass and mist and the marks where something had stood. In the village, life returned slowly. Margaret remembered her recipe. Thomas recognized his own hands. The children began to play again, but none of them remembered Ezra. There was no room above the baker's shop where a lonely man had lived. There were no records of debts he'd collected. No one could recall ever seeing someone with his face, his walk, his voice. He had given his name, and the door had taken everything. His past, his place, his proof that he had ever drawn breath. The field stood empty. And if you walked there now, on certain moonless nights, you might hear a whisper on the wind. Speak a name, and I shall open. Beware the doors that only open when you give something away. For greed wears many faces, and the hunger for power asks many prices. But the cruelest hunger is the one that feeds on who we are, that trades identity for knowledge, belonging for control. In some villages, temptation doesn't wear a face. It wears a voice. And it asks, so softly, for just one name more.